Well, hello, my name is Dakota. Today we're starting our very first Tea Chai Day online tea class, and this is going to be the second tea class overall, and we're going to be talking about green tea today. And more specifically, we're going to talk about the major differences between Chinese and Japanese green tea, which are pretty much the only kinds of green tea in the world. So we're going to start out with talking about what actually defines green tea, how it's made, what kind of flavor profiles it has, that sort of thing, and then I'll talk specifically about China versus Japan and how that works, differences in processing, differences in flavors, differences in the teas themselves. And then finally we're going to do just a little brewing demonstration, talk about some of the more traditional brewing styles from both China and Japan. Green tea is the world's most popular kind of tea. It takes up about 70% of all production in China and over 95% of all production in Japan. Japan pretty much just makes green teas. So what makes green tea unique as opposed to other kinds of tea is the level of oxidation. The level of oxidation is pretty much what defines the different types of tea anyways. What oxidation is the activation of the PPO enzyme, which causes basically chemical changes within the leaf. What this enzyme does is it converts catechins or polyphenols in the leaf, which are flavor compounds, into other compounds, and it fundamentally alters the flavor of the tea. So with green tea, what happens is one of the very first steps in its processing is it's fired or panned in a process called Kilgreen or Shating in Chinese. And what this does is it kills or deactivates this PPO enzyme to stop the leaves from oxidizing at all. So what green tea is a fully unoxidized tea, and this will affect the flavor, just like a black tea is a fully oxidized tea. This will affect the flavor as well. So black teas tend to have more astringent, earthy, fruity tones to them, sometimes like a caramel or honey-like sweetness. Whereas green teas, which still have more of these catechins and polyphenols, they will tend to have a more vegetal flavor and a more powerful astringency if they're over-infused. After this Kilgreen process, the Shating, that deactivates the PPO enzyme, the green tea leaves are then processed more or less like any other kind of tea is processed. They're rolled, usually by hand, but sometimes by machinery, in order to release aromatic compounds. And then they would be dried and dried again and then packaged and shipped off. It's pretty simple. So the really important thing with a green tea is that it has that PPO enzyme deactivated very early in the process, so it preserves a very green flavor. Now the major difference between Chinese and Japanese green teas is how they accomplish this killing of the PPO enzyme. Alright, so in China there are all sorts of ways to deactivate the PPO enzyme or do the Kilgreen part of the green tea processing. And what way is used to deactivate the enzyme is going to affect the outcome of the tea and what kind of flavors it'll possess. So like for example, the vast majority of Chinese green teas, the Kilgreen step is accomplished using large ovens, essentially, like industrial vats. And they'll basically just cook the leaves for like 30 seconds to a minute, and that deactivates the enzyme. And then from there, the tea can be processed in different ways depending on what kind of tea it's going to be. But there's also other ways of processing green tea in China. For example, Dragonwell, one of the more famous Chinese green teas, is actually literally pan-fried to deactivate the PPO enzyme, which is also why Dragonwell has this really unique, distinctive, roasted chestnut type flavor to it. Now, when tea first made its way into Japan, this was during the Song Dynasty in China. During the Song Dynasty in China, it was the era of beaten tea. So at this point, all tea was being drunk in the style that we drink matcha today, basically. So tea leaves were ground into a fine powder and then whisked into a froth and drunk like that. This is why the Japanese tea ceremony still uses matcha, and why matcha is so inextricably linked with Japanese culture is because this is how tea was first introduced to the country. Now originally in Japan, they used pretty much exactly the same methods of processing green tea that China did. So they had all these different ways of deactivating the PPO enzyme. They had all these different ways of making green tea, basically. But in more recent years, Japanese tastes and culture have evolved to a different place, so that now Japanese green teas are a little bit more unique. Now there's only one way in Japan to deactivate the PPO enzyme. So in Japan, when making green tea, what the tea farmers actually do, the initial step of processing, is to create what is called aracha, which is an unfinished product of green tea. And from there, the aracha is then processed into different types of tea depending on what it's destined to be. But to create aracha, you have to, of course, deactivate the PPO enzyme, and in Japan, the way that is done is by steaming. That is the only way that Japanese green teas are processed. And what this steaming does is it deactivates the PPO enzyme while also retaining a lot of very herbaceous, floral, intensely green characteristics like you would think of as in sencha or matcha. Literally like green tea, vibrant green tea. Yeah. Alright, so that is the major difference between Chinese and Japanese greens. Now I'm going to go ahead and do a demonstration of the traditional brewing methods in both countries. So in China, that would be a version of Gongfu cha using a gaiwan for green tea, and then for Japan, we're going to go over briefly a simplified version of sencha using a kyusu teapot. The first step in a gaiwan ceremony, as with pretty much any tea brewing ceremony, is you have to heat up all of your vessels. Just a quick rinse. This has the purpose both of cleansing your teaware before use and also of literally heating up the vessels so that the temperature of the tea is not affected. When you pour it in. Now, what we're going to be brewing today for our Chinese green tea is the Cloud and Mist. First brew, the tea is discarded to rinse the leaves, to wake up the leaves. And the second infusion, I guess, is ready to be drunk. So at this point, I don't actually have any guests right now, but if I did, this would be the point at which I would hand out the tea and we could all enjoy it. So the utensils I just used for the Chinese tea ceremony, or Gaiwan service in this case, are the Gaiwan, this guy here. It's literally a cup with a lid, or a bowl with a lid. The second vessel, which you'd use your strainer to strain the tea into so that you're left just with the liqueur. It strains out any leaves that might possibly get through your cups, and then the tea tongs, which you use to handle the cups so that you don't burn yourself. Alright, so for our Japanese tea demonstration, we're going to be doing a simplified version of Senchado. For this, just like with the last one, we're first going to warm up all of our teaware. We're going to be brewing some Gyokuro today for our Japanese green. Now, while the last green tea would have been brewed at around 175 degrees Fahrenheit, this one is even more delicate and should not be brewed at anything higher than 165. Just like with the last ceremony, first discard one steep. As you can see with Senchado, you're going to see a lot more grit in the bottom because you don't have a second vessel or a filter like you would in the previous demonstration. In this case, you can see a lot of the Gyokuro leaves still left in the bottom of the cup. Those are meant to be drunk. This is my own personal Kyushu, and it's a little bit lower quality than you would typically want to use in a ceremony like this. So there's definitely some more leaves than you would typically want, but demonstration is still accurate. For a Senchado ceremony, it's significantly simpler. All you would need is a Kyushu teapot like this one, side handle. That's all for today. Thank you for watching.